Hi, this is JP and welcome back to a new video. This is going to be a very random, out of the blue idea that I just got on the bus back. I was on a kayak trip this last weekend and I didn't have a lot of time to record a video, and especially last week has been crazy with school, so I didn't want to miss any more upload deadlines. And as I sat on the bus, I was thinking about this Uglies movie. This was a dystopian YA book that was very popular back in the 2010's, and this just came out on Netflix and it's gotten a lot of unpopular reviews, and so that was kind of in the back of my head. And then at the same time, maybe like a week ago, I've heard for the first time this whole thing about Brat and the Brat summer, and I remember this because in the bus there was someone listening to one of the Charlie XCX songs, and this just brought me back to, again, a couple of weeks ago when I first heard about this, and I had to watch like an hour-long video explaining what the whole thing was, and I listened to the album and it was really cool. And actually I know that back then some booktubers that I really like made some videos inspired by the Brat album, and they were recommending books based on the kind of Brat vibes. And so very tired JP was on the bus back from a kayak trip, and these two things were just like in my brain: Uglies, Brat. And I just kind of thought, you know what, how about we rank 2010 dystopian YA novels that I read based on a Brat categorization system. So here I am showing the ranking categories, and all of these are inspired by songs from the Brat album. None of these reflect my liking of the songs or which one I like best. They were just for inspiration. So at the bottom of the list we have Rotten Right to the Core from the song Apple. Then we have Wish You'd Talk from Talk Talk. Then in the middle of the list we have Looks Perfect for the Background, which I think is funny for like a mid-tier book that is just there in the background. It was a good thing, you're not like putting it out, but it's also just like fading out in the background and you don't kind of notice it. From I Might Say Something Stupid, I think it's the name of the song. Then Looking Like an Icon, an iconic line from 360. And then at the top of the list we have I'm Your Number One from Von Dutch, or however you pronounce that. Now I'm going to be ranking these based on my enjoyment of the books back when I read them. I don't really have a lot of opinions of these books right now, so this is just like going back in memory lane and trying to figure out or remember what I thought of them back when I read them. So let's just put together the series. Okay, I mean that works for now. So the first on the list is going to be what is it? The first one is Legend by Marilu, I want to say. Yeah, I remember this being a bit cool because it had a little of technology involved. I think in a lot of these dystopian YA novels, you know, you had like some technology aspect in terms of like, there's this procedure that lets you do this or become that, or you know, the capital is like pretty advanced, they have like flying things. But I remember that in Legend, technology in terms of like surveillance or something like that was important. So I remember even back then thinking, oh, like this is cool, like this is not just any kind of tech put into the story just to make something in the plot make sense, but rather the use of technology kind of being important in the story. So yeah, I think I'm going to put that in the Looks Perfect for the Background. It was a good book. I remember some of it, but at the same time it's not even close to being iconic. And I mean, even just thinking about the second book, like I have no idea what happens there. So We Should Talk, We Should Tell Me Something, because I am not remembering anything about the sequel, which I think it's called Prodigy, I want to say. I don't even know if there's more books in that series. So for now, Wish You'd Talk More to Me, Prodigy book. Yeah, let's continue with a classic in this kind of genre. And that's going to be the Maze Runner series. I think I'm just not even gonna try to give the say the name of the authors, and I'll just put them on the screen because I don't remember. Oh, here, James Dashner is his name. So the Maze Runner, obviously super iconic book. I mean, I kind of gave it away. I think the whole scenery of like the maze was super cool. Even back when I read it, I remember being like very intrigued by the maze and how these kind of excursions out into the maze work, and the expeditions, and there are some like spider monsters, and you have just this like teen society. I don't know, I thought it was like really cool, and I mean, it's one of the iconic YA novels when we think about that time, so I think it deserves its place here in the looking like an icon. Actually, the Scorch Trials, the second book in this series, was also pretty cool. I'm gonna be probably giving spoilers for a lot of these. Like, these have been around for such a long time, and I don't think they're being read nowadays anymore. So I don't think no one's missing anything from a couple of spoilers. But I know that in the Scorch Trials, they, you know, obviously are out of the maze, and there is this kind of post-apocalyptic desert twist. There is, I think, like a zombie component to this. Okay, maybe actually this should just go to the top of looks perfect for the background, because it's kind of almost there into the iconic category, but it feels wrong just putting it right next to the first one, which I just remember so much about. And then in a trend that I think we'll see more of, The Death Cure, the third book in this trilogy. I don't know if there's more books. I remember even back then feeling super bored about it. I will say that The Death Cure has my favorite scene in these books, and that is just like a very, very kind of tough character moment that happens between the protagonist and his best friend. And I just remember that being like quite shocking, but that's literally the only thing I remember from The Death Cure, and I do remember being quite bored about this. So yeah, Death Cure, you go right at the bottom, really. So let's continue with The Other Side of the Island by Allegra Goodman. I don't think this was that big back then, so again, it's not necessarily an icon in terms of the overall community's kind of thoughts about it, but I just remember really, really liking it, and kind of being, I remember it was like one of those YA books that was not as common, and I felt that it was, oh, this is such a hidden gem, like no one's reading this, and there's this kind of thing happening with the old people in this island, and the protagonist kind of finding out where old people go. Obviously, like now saying it out loud, it feels like such a cliche, but I think this was the first time that I read that trope of like, ooh, old people are disappearing, I wonder what we do with them. And I don't know, I just remember that being like super interesting, shocking, revealing. It was like, I thinking back, this is one of the kind of, when I was making the list of like, I want to see which books I read to put into the ranking software, this was one of the first ones that I thought about, so I think it deserves its place. Unwind, I'm just gonna go and put this at the I'm Your Number One. This is by Neil Shusterman, which has been, I think, very popular recently, but for his Scythe series, which I never read, and I think it could be on this list. I don't know if that came a lot later though. Unwind, actually, yeah, this is a number one. I remember a lot from this story. So the premise of this novel is that you have a version of the United States where parents are allowed to basically sell off their kids into an institution that, a government institution that just takes their organs and starts selling them out as, I don't know if they sell them or if they give them to donations, but just imagine there's like a car accident and someone is in the need of a liver or whatever. they have all of these kids that were basically sold by their parents, waiting so they could be operated and, you know, transplanting organs into other people that need them or whatnot. So there's this character that had a part of his brain implanted from another teenager, and so sometimes they get thoughts of this other person kind of in their head. And again, like, this might be super kind of standard now, not standard in the sense that it's common, but back in the day I was like, whoa, this is crazy, this is so like philosophical. Like, imagine having someone else's thoughts kind of blended with yours and not even being able to tell the difference. Like, where does the line between your soul and like there and where they are? So I don't know, I thought that was like super cool, and the ending is also very twisted. I don't know, if you've never read this, I'm not gonna recommend it because I don't know how well it has stood the test of time. But back then, like, I loved this novel. I think there are continuations. I never read them, and I think the end of the story is like pretty self-contained, so you can absolutely read this as a standalone. Yeah, let's continue with The Host by Stephanie Meyer, I think, the author of Twilight. Yeah, this was not very good. The Host is a bit similar to what I was saying in Unwind. I think the premise of this story is that you have these aliens that are on Earth, and they get, I don't know if they like just get into your body or if they're implanted into your brain, and then things happen from that, and you have this character that stumbles upon this kind of community of humans that is like the last community of survivors, you know, humans trying to keep their humanity because the aliens are like yeah, exactly, like being hosted in other humans in the rest of the world and like taking ownership of blah blah blah. I don't know, I thought it was really boring. This girl is just like in this Dune inspired kind of underground chamber system, and yeah, there's just not a lot that happens. It's a very long book, I feel, for being, you know, YA, so it was just pages and pages of not much talking, let's say. Yeah, not very good. Divergent, yeah, I was one of those. I loved it. I really liked I think her name was Triss, joining the Dauntless faction or whatever they're called, and like jumping off of trains and like climbing these kind of spinning wheel thing, and there's like a cliff and they're like cavern system. I don't know, like, if that's not giving you what Brat would be in 2020s for like YA audiences in books, which is a lot of ifs, I don't know what is. Yeah, Divergence, iconic to a point that is like hard to dismiss or recognize its influence in like a lot of young readers and even like the dystopian genre. I remember being like super excited when she was going through all of her trials and surviving, and you know, you always felt like, ah, she's gonna make it, and you know, then the rebellion thing starts, and yeah, I'm just gonna go ahead and put these like in the wish you talk and rotten down to the core. Like I don't remember anything about these books. The only reason why I'm putting Allegiant a bit above Insurgent is because I remember some of the side characters that are part of this rebellion. I think it was just fun to expand a bit like the world after Divergent. I mean, not that it's giving it a lot of points, but yeah, that I think, again, even back then, I think it was very disappointing to read Allegiant, and well, you know what, I think I'm being a bit too harsh. I think this was more average than I'm giving credit for, because I do remember a lot of this part of the story, and it was like exciting to follow up Triss and like Four and the gang, but you could still like notice the kind of decaying quality of, of the story, and you know, it just started to break apart everywhere. Hunger Games, iconic, obviously. I think everyone... What else can we say about Hunger Games at this point? I wonder if these books hold up well. I think it would be interesting to just reread the Hunger Games, because I think out of everyone, like, just being completely, or trying to be more objective, like, the Hunger Games is the one that will be remembered for sure for generations. I think it's a staple of the genre, probably the one that started all of these trends. And I think the idea of the capital was like super, you know, extravagant and interesting, and like, oh, they're sending people to fight. And, you know, I know that the Hunger Games is extremely similar to Battle Royale, which I've also read, and I really liked that book when I read it. Maybe I should have added it to the list. But all that aside, I think it has its credit, and, you know, Katniss is a super blank character. Maybe I remember her relationship with Pita was just like awkward and funny back then. And yeah, I think the movies have also done a great job at immortalizing this through a lot of memes, and I don't know, this is like, it cannot go under iconic, and obviously this should be at the top of the iconic category. Let's continue with Catching Fire, which is actually my favorite of these series. I loved the idea of the clock determining the dangers, and like I think it was something like each hour there's one zone that's like in danger, and each zone has its own unique threat. And the idea of having a Hunger Games with previous winners of Hunger Games was like so genius. And yeah, the other characters in the story I thought were also really cool. I remember in particular Mags, which is an old woman. Whoops, I think my video cut off and I lost a chunk of that. So yeah, I think what I was saying was that Mockingjay was just very disappointing. Even back when I read it, I remember that the ending was awful, especially with Katniss and her sister and something that happens there. There were like no emotional repercussions to the end of that storyline. And then also President Snow's defeat, let's just say, was also extremely disappointing. I don't know, I think this story just concluded in a rush, and characters were dying left and right, and it felt like it didn't really matter. And I don't know, I think it just came out as a poor execution. And I think the idea of all of these YA dystopias ending up in a rebellion became too old too quickly, and it got overused. And so yeah, I don't know, Mockingjay, don't recommend. It was bad back then, and it will still be bad right to the core now. So that was that. Partials, don't even remember you. I don't have anything negative to say against it. But yeah, just nothing bad. We should have given me something more to talk about. And actually, I am going to rearrange it up here. Let's see, Hunger Games, probably like this. These ones don't really matter, same with you. Yeah, Legion was probably the worst there. So that was that. And then the Fifth Wave, this was also a good story. I don't remember so much about it, other than, I mean, now in retrospective, it has similar vibes to The Last of Us, in the sense that there is kind of this post-apocalyptic world. There has been 4 waves that have nearly destroyed humanity, and now there is a 5th wave. And I think there is also something about a virus and someone being the cure to that virus. It's pretty much in that trope. So it has the The Last of Us kind of vibes. Obviously this is probably newer. It came after the game, so just as a comparison. But yeah, I don't think it was a bad book. I even remember when in my life I was reading this, and I actually think it's cool when you have this history with books and you can place them at distinct points in your life. I think that's pretty cool. And so I don't remember so much about it, but I think it was an enjoyable read back then. And yeah, last but not least, we have The Giver, and this was also a pretty mid book for me. I read it in school, and even though it's so short, I thought it was so dry and kind of unemotional. I, in general, struggle a lot with books where characters don't have an emotional connection with the reader, and even if this is based on the world and makes sense in the society they're living in or their situation in life, I just think it makes for boring stories. And you know, The Giver, you have this society where no one has any emotions, they don't even see in color, and there is one person, obviously our main character, who becomes the apprentice of the Giver, and so he's going to receive the history and all the memories of humanity to try to guide them in some wise way. And you know, I think the concept is really good, and the movie does this scene where he receives all of humanity's kind of memories in a very emotional way. I remember you get this very fast sequence slash collage of scenes from all over the world, different cultures, and it's very quick, and it's, you know, music and very emotional. I thought it was very well done, and it represented this idea, this shock of just getting everything transferred into your brain in seconds. Also color, because yeah, again, these people see in black and white, I think. So the movie did pretty good. The book, you know, it looks good in the background. So that's it. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next one.